Morning. Please take a seat, everybody. Take a seat. Thank you. Wonderful to see everybody. Happy Budget Day. Or for all of us who have more quantitative minds than qualitative, happy Super Bowl. And we know that today is an important day because one of the most important responsibilities of the executive branch and also the legislative branch is to craft and enact a balanced budget that reflects the needs of this state. We know that budgets, they are moral documents. Where we choose to invest actually defines our values, and it dictates the course of our future. In our first year, we proved that we can work together to actually build a budget that matches our values, and when you do that, you can deliver big results. And we worked together to prove that in this time, we would work together to get big things done, to prioritize fiscal discipline, and know that we don't have to choose between those two things. For example, we took an all-of-the-above approach when it came to public safety and focused on bringing down the fever of violent crime in our society. When we took office, Baltimore had endured 8 straight years of 300+ homicides annually, and the homicide rate around the state had doubled during that same period of time. 1 year in, we're starting to see homicides and non-fatal shootings down, not just in Baltimore, but across the entire state. We made strategic investments to create jobs, to build wealth, and to generate economic growth. When we took office, Maryland was ranked 43rd in unemployment. Maryland was ranked 47th in economic momentum. 1 year in, Maryland now has the lowest unemployment rate in the entire country, and we have jumped 20 slots in national rankings for economic momentum. We laid the foundation to make Maryland the state that serves. When we took office, we got to get through a long speech, y'all. When we took office, communities at home and across the state were contending with this measure of political vitriol and, frankly, civic fatigue. 1 year in, we launched our Department of Service and Civic Innovation. We jump-started a historic service year option and put a real fuel and focus on Maryland Corps. And for the first time in 3 years, we saw a net increase in the number of public sector employees, a net increase of people who have raised their hand to serve this state. And we achieved everything that I just said by moving in partnership with the legislature, in partnership with local elected officials, with organizations, and with businesses across the state of Maryland. And today, that work continues. We are here to unveil our second budget proposal, and we are focused on 4 priorities. We will make Maryland safer. We will make Maryland more affordable. We will make Maryland more competitive. And we will continue to make Maryland the state that serves. And we will achieve each of these goals without raising taxes on Marylanders. Secretary Grady will speak to each of these 4 priorities in further detail. But I want to take a few minutes just to share some of the highlights. First, on making Maryland safer. You cannot have safer communities without supporting law enforcement to get it done. Boots on the ground do not just help us to prevent crime and help us to react to crime. They also help us to solve crime and to close cases. Our men and women in uniform put their lives on the line for our safety. And they're the ones who are making sure that we can get repeat violent offenders off of our streets. That's why our budget includes a record $127 million for local police agencies. That is a $5 million increase over the last year. We also need to confront the inexcusable fact that 75% of homicides in our state are committed with a gun. This is a public safety crisis. This is also a public health crisis. Our budget delivers $10 million to stand up a new Center for Firearm Violence Prevention and Intervention, and together, this work is going to save lives. Now, I know there will be robust debates throughout the entire session on juvenile justice, and our administration will be an active participant in these conversations. And look, I believe in accountability, and I believe in consequences for people that break the law. But if we put children into a system that makes them more likely to commit crime, we're doing it wrong. That's why our budget provides an increase of $16 million to programs at the Department of Juvenile Services, and it's going to help to ensure that we can stop the cycle of crime in our communities. Second, we are going to make our state more affordable. Our budget addresses two of the biggest strains on family bank accounts: housing and childcare. For most Marylanders, rental properties they put a third of their monthly paycheck towards rent. Mortgage interest rates have more than doubled over the past 2 years. This is a simple equation of supply and demand. Economics 101, y'all. If we do not have enough homes, the prices go up. If we build more homes, the prices come down. This is why our budget includes an additional $115 million for housing and community revitalization initiatives under the Department of Housing and Community Development. And we also know the cost of childcare is too high. The amount of emails and calls we received on snow days. And look, access to childcare doesn't just affect your child and your family. It changes the trajectory of our state's fiscal health. Earlier this month, the comptroller released a report highlighting that as childcare costs increase, overall female employment decreases by 5%. In order to get this economy going, we've got to make it easier for people to actually participate in the economy. And we are very proud that this budget includes the largest single-year investment in childcare in our state's history. Third, on making Maryland more competitive, I continue to hear from entrepreneurs and business leaders who still say it is still too difficult to grow your business in the state of Maryland. We have an obligation to use every tool at our disposal to make it easier to grow our economy, and not harder. And we need to do it with a focus on equity. This session, we will introduce legislation to streamline the permitting process, to reduce regulatory red tape, and to direct investments towards industries of the future. And our proposed budget is filled with priorities to sharpen Maryland's competitive edge. We've included $100 million to support the construction of the new FBI headquarters in Greenbelt, and that is going to have a generational impact on our communities. Our budget includes major investments to drive growth in Baltimore, which is now one of the fastest growing economies in the nation. Our budget provides $5 million to Delegate Atterbury and Senator Augustine's revolutionary state Equitech Fund, which is going to lift entrepreneurs of color in emerging industries. Our budget delivers record funding for K-12 public schools so we can build stronger schools and earlier pathways to work, wages, and wealth for all of our young people. And our budget provides significant investments for job training in industries of the future, like cyber and quantum, so Maryland can truly win this decade. And fourth and finally, we are going to continue to make Maryland the state that serves. We've been very clear from day one that we were going to invest in service. and we are going to be unapologetic about that. Our proposed budget includes funding to bring up the number of Marylanders in the service year option and the Maryland Corps from 280 to 500. And for the second year in a row, we will give a much-needed raise to our state employees. We refuse to balance the budget on the backs of public servants. Now, drafting this budget wasn't easy. It was hard. We were operating under very tight constraints and very tight realities. Since 2017, the Department of Legislative Services has forecasted structural budget deficits. And of the last 20 budgets in this state, 17 of them have needed cuts in order to stay balanced. Unprecedented stock gains and historic federal stimulus during COVID-19 smoothed out our budgets over the last few years, but extra money in the short term will never solve our long-term structural challenges. I said this when I was a candidate for governor. I said this when I was governor-elect. I said it this time last year. I said it when we unveiled our first budget. I have said this over and over and over again throughout our first 12 months. We entered this year knowing that we would have to confront big structural challenges. But the thing is, we're not alone. This is not a Maryland issue. States around the country continue to deal with similar hurdles, from Indiana to New Jersey, to Michigan, to California, to New York. So look, I'm new to politics, but I'm not new to budgets. If you are the CEO of a company and your business is not growing, then maybe it is time to rethink your business model. It will not be enough to simply rebuild state government. We need to refocus state government. This budget is an important step in order for us to achieve that long-term goal. And we've taken it in a fiscally responsible way, and in a fiscally responsible way that the people of this state have become accustomed to with this administration. We've studied the data extensively, and we've directed state resources towards proven programs that will have significant societal return. And we prioritize spending in a way that invests in our state and grows our economy in the long run. That's the philosophy at the heart of this budget proposal. And now to discuss the budget in further detail, I'd like to turn it over to our remarkable Budget Secretary, Helene Green.
Thank you, Governor, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to start with just a bit of framing context for the economic and fiscal environment within which we've planned this budget. The context impacts directly the key decisions the governor has made and also those guiding principles that he just shared. First, when we think about the state's economic and fiscal position, we can't help but recap how the decisions made by the governor and the legislature for the current fiscal 24 budget have positioned the state well for this period of transition that we're experiencing. The final fiscal 24 budget reflected a $364 million surplus balance for the fiscal year. The budget directed $1 billion of cash surplus to education and transportation priorities, and it maintained 10% of general fund revenue in the rainy day fund at $2.5 billion. These strategies have given us the flexibility we need to navigate responsibly and strategically. Additionally, we are very encouraged by the strong momentum with Maryland's economy that we're experiencing in 2023. The governor mentioned many of these highlights in his comments, but just a little bit more detail. The FBI relocation to Greenbelt, Maryland is projected to bring 7,500 jobs and $4 billion worth of economic activity to Maryland. The Howard Street and Frederick Douglass tunnels and Susquehanna River Bridge are projected to bring more than 30,000 jobs and overhaul our commercial and passenger rail infrastructure. The Baltimore Tech Hub designation has the potential for more than $4 billion in economic impact and more than 52,000 jobs by 2030. And last, offshore wind projects are projected to bring more than 15,000 jobs to Maryland. And of course, the recent announcement that Baltimore City's GDP growth of 5.9% in 2022 was the 8th highest among large counties nationwide. And last, the fact that Maryland has had the lowest unemployment rate in the country for the last 4 months in a row and had the largest year-over-year unemployment rate decrease, dropping 1.3%. Additionally, as the governor mentioned, Maryland jumped 20 spots in a ranking of states' economic momentum in 2023. Of course, these trends reflect very strong national economic results in 2023 as well. The economy nationally created 2.7 million new jobs in 2023, and unemployment rates for Hispanic workers, Black women, and people with disabilities all hit record lows. However, we can't take our eyes off the ball here in Maryland. Our families are working to absorb price pressures from the inflation spike from 2021 through mid-2022. The Fed reported as recently as December that total U.S. household debt hit $17 trillion in Q3 of 2023. Maryland is climbing its way back from stagnant population growth, and as we know and have heard a lot recently, fewer Marylanders are actively participating in the labor force compared to pre-pandemic. Just a couple of quick exhibits to illustrate these points. As you see here, nationally, inflation has declined for well over a year, while unemployment has remained below 4% for 2 years, the longest stretch since the 1960s. While Maryland is clearly participating in the low unemployment phenomenon, being the lowest as the governor shared, our families are still managing the shock of the steep inflation that we experienced through 2021 and midway through 2022 in their household budgets. This has directly informed the governor's position against raising taxes at this time. As this graphic so clearly illustrates, Maryland also needs to focus on population growth. And as you've heard a lot lately, fewer Marylanders are actively working compared to pre-pandemic 2019. Traditionally, Maryland's rate of labor force participation has been significantly higher than the nation, but that gap is closing, as you see on this chart, which goes through November 2023. You can see clearly that Virginia, as of end of November 2023, has actually surpassed Maryland's participation rate, and New Jersey is right about at our rate. So what does all this context mean for the 2025 budget? The context has directly informed our 3 guiding principles: being fiscally responsible, data-directed resources, and prioritizing the use of public funds toward our core responsibilities as a state government and to the services that impact quality of life for Marylanders and that grow our economy. This budget is about working to prove value for our taxpayers while we strengthen our competitiveness. Top lines on the fiscal 2025 budget. The total all funds operating budget stands at $63.1 billion. That's down from $64 billion in fiscal 24. The general fund operating budget, the primary focus of today's presentation, stands at $25.8 billion. That's down from $27.4 billion in fiscal 24, a decline of 5.8%. The total capital budget for the state, $6.6 billion, split between $3.2 billion for the capital improvement program and $3.6 billion for the consolidated transportation program at MDOT. The budget is fiscally responsible. The proposed budget flips the projected cash shortfall that DLS reported in December of $1.1 billion to a positive cash ending balance of $103 million in fiscal 25. That meets the Spending Affordability Committee recommendation of at least $100 million cash balance. The budget reduces the structural deficit for fiscal 25 by 34% to $502 million from $761 million, which also meets the recommendation of the Spending Affordability Committee. Next, the budget maintains a rainy day fund balance of 9.4% of general fund revenues at just over $2.3 billion. This exceeds the recommendation of the Spending Affordability Committee to maintain at least 8.5% in the rainy day fund. And the budget does all this without raising taxes and investing in a more responsive government for Marylanders. The fiscal 25 budget reflects a rainy day fund balance at $2.3 billion, which is more than 9% of revenue. This chart shows that this level of reserve, while down slightly from the past 2 years, remains very high relative to the last 20 plus years, going back to 2001. Even with a fiscally responsible framing, this budget includes a number of important investments that will make Maryland safer, make Maryland more affordable, make Maryland more competitive, and continue to make Maryland the state that serves. First, talking about how are we going to make Maryland safer, which all Marylanders care a lot about. The governor has described his all-of-the-above approach to public safety. This includes funding local law enforcement, supporting victims, innovating gun violence prevention strategies, and engaging our most at-risk youth. You will see all of these prioritized in the proposed fiscal 25 budget. State aid for police protection enhancement funds see a $5 million increase in the 25 budget to a total for state aid for police protection of $127 million. Funding for Victims of Crime Act, or VOCA, is funded for the third year in a row at a record $35 million in state funds. The new statewide gun violence prevention center at the Department of Health is included with $10 million in new funding to get it ramped up. Continuing on safer, Thrive Academy is budgeted with a $4.4 million increase to the DJS budget to expand rehabilitation services for the most at-risk youth, going from 190 youth participants this year to 300 participants statewide in fiscal 25. This program was originally funded in the current year with ARPA dollars, temporary money. It's had good results so far, and the budget proposes to expand it statewide and bring it permanent. Second, the DJS budget also includes $12 million in new funding for Enhanced Services Continuum and a Community Investment Initiative. Both of these are targeted for the young people who need services the most. Third, the budget includes $3 million in new funding at MDH for assisted outpatient treatment. These are programs in counties. Studies of assisted outpatient treatment demonstrate that it decreases incarceration by 87% and inpatient hospitalizations by 70%. It also results in fewer arrests and less homelessness. Making Maryland more affordable. This is particularly significant piece of the budget plan for fiscal 25, given the pressure on families and our goal of retaining and attracting population. As the governor mentioned, this budget tackles in a very big way two of the biggest drivers for rising costs for working families: childcare costs and housing. Childcare first. Various reports show that Maryland is currently the 8th most expensive state for childcare. Across the state, the cost of childcare can range from $13,000 to $35,000 a year. The Maryland Family Network in 2018 estimated that Maryland lost more than $2 billion in lost wages, taxes, and spending due to challenges with childcare. This budget provides $218 million additional general funds in fiscal 24, the current year, and $270 million in additional funds, new funding, in fiscal 25 to support the Child Care Scholarship Program at MSDE. This will help us sustain rapid growth that the program has achieved over the past year. That's almost $490 million over the 2 years. Housing. The Department of Housing and Community Development reports that Maryland is facing a shortage of 120,000 housing units. The fiscal 25 capital budget, as the governor mentioned, reflects an increase of 2/3, $115 million in fiscal 25 for priority housing and community development investments. The investments fall across the 6 programs listed here. The $290 million total capital budget for DHCD that's budgeted in fiscal 25 is projected by the agency to result in more than 23,000 jobs created and at least $87 million in state and local revenue impact. The investment in the budget for rental housing alone, which is budgeted to double from $55 million in fiscal 24 to $110 million in fiscal 25, is projected to create 5,100 new housing units and lift close to 1,500 families and more than 2,000 children out of poverty. Next, making Maryland more competitive. We have investments in education, infrastructure, and economic development throughout the budget. First, when it comes to education, the fiscal 25 budget includes record funding for PK through 12 education at $9.2 billion in operating funds for Maryland's public schools. This is an increase of 5%, or nearly $500 million over the current year. Fiscal 25 will be the 3rd year of fully funding Blueprint for Maryland's Future. And the budget also includes more than $900 million in capital funds for public school construction. Within the funding for Maryland's public schools, the budget includes an 8% increase, or $160 million, targeted for funding to support low-income students. This chart gives you a sense of that trajectory on K through 12 education aid over the last several years back to fiscal 2015. And you see since fiscal 23, the significant increasing rates year over year as the Blueprint formulas have been folded into the state budget. In addition, the capital budget includes more than $900 million to make our school facilities better. While the $900 million is down slightly from the pandemic years, it's nearly 3 times the historic annual funding levels for school construction. Next, on higher education, the proposed budget includes $2.3 billion in record state funding to University System of Maryland institutions. Notably, the budget includes an increase of nearly $5 million to University of Maryland Eastern Shore to double, for the first time, the state federal match for 1890 land-grant institutions. The budget also includes $25 million in new state funding for a higher education campus security fund. Infrastructure. So the budget includes a $150 million one-time contribution from the Rainy Day Fund to fund a portion of our contribution to WMATA, thereby enabling MDOT to restore transportation funds across a number of priority programs that were slated to be reduced in the transportation plan that was released in December. Our infrastructure budget leverages federal money for the Frederick Douglass Tunnel, the Susquehanna River Bridge, and for expanding broadband to every Marylander. Third, there's a major investment in the expansion of data science and computing infrastructure at Johns Hopkins University, with a $20 million state contribution to a projected $150 million project by the university to expand its data infrastructure. When it comes to economic development, first, the budget includes $6.4 million in new state investment to support Baltimore's Tech Hub Consortium. This will give the consortium tools to compete for over $70 million in federal funding. The $6.4 million is spread across 6 initiatives: the Pavel Lapierre Innovation Acceleration Grant Program, the Maryland Small Business Innovation Research and Technology Program, the Baltimore Innovation Initiative, a 2-year pilot at TEDCO, a $1 million match to the Baltimore Tech Hub Consortium, $840,000 for Upsurge Uprise. This is a down payment on a $2.5 million 3-year commitment to that program. And last, $700,000 commitment for Maryland Technology Internship Program at UMBC. Additional economic development initiatives are throughout the budget that will help us invest in our innovation economy. Here's 5 examples, one of which the governor mentioned in his comments: an increase to the budget for the Maryland Equitech Growth Fund from $3 million this year to $5 million in fiscal '25. Another one that I would highlight is a $2 million increase to the EARN program, Employment Advancement Right Now. This is a nationally recognized program. Assessments of the program show a $17 return on investment based on every dollar invested. The expansion next year will allow 6,000 Marylanders to be trained for jobs in priority industries. And last, the governor mentioned that the budget includes $100 million to support the location of the new FBI headquarters in Greenbelt. As we know, this is the largest project the GSA has ever undertaken, and it's projected to bring 7,500 jobs to Maryland. Finally, the budget has important investments to continue to make Maryland the state that serves. The budget for the Department of Service and Civic Innovation includes an increase of $13 million to expand the Maryland Corps and Service Year Option programs to at least 500 participants in fiscal '25. Additionally, the budget includes funding to continue our momentum on rebuilding state government. The governor mentioned in his comments that we've made good progress on recruitment and retention of state employees in 2023. The chart shows we added a net more than 1,300 employees to state agencies over the calendar year, and that compares to net decreases in the 2 years before. I think I'm going to turn it back to the governor at this point to wrap us up.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary, and the entire DBM team for just not just the hard work, but the indefatigable way that you've approached this entire process. We have gone through every single line of this budget together. Every single line of this budget. And I can say with confidence that we're proud of this proposed budget. And the thing that I know is that this wasn't just about doing the work. It wasn't just about the executive branch and DBM and members of this remarkable administration getting together and doing it. We did this work in partnership. We reached out to leaders in communities. We reached out to members of the General Assembly. We reached out to village elders. And we wanted to make sure that this proposed budget had everyone's fingerprints on it. Because this budget is not just a reflection of an administration. This budget is a reflection of our shared aspirations. Our aspirations to make Maryland safer, to make it more affordable, to make it more competitive, and to make it the state that serves. And we are going to realize these aspirations in a fiscally responsible way. We will work together to leverage the resources of the Rainy Day Fund. We will work together to better collaborate how and where public investment can actually drive long-term societal returns. We will work together to use state money in a way that delivers the biggest returns. And now we are ready to get to work with the General Assembly to get this final budget passed. We're going to keep our heads down. We're going to do the work. We're going to do it in partnership. And we're going to give Marylanders the kind of leadership that we know that they deserve. This will be Maryland's decade, and the investments today will pave the way for the future that we're all going to seek. So with that, we'd love to be able to take any questions.
Governor, in listening to the top line,
Good morning, Brian. How you doing? Coming in hot. All right. Talk to me. Yeah.
The budgets, it sounds like you're trying to make inroads into reducing the structural deficit, but I also know just the ticking off of increases in the budget, almost $1.2 billion in increases. What things got cut? What things didn't meet muster for you in terms of the data that was driven? What did you cut to provide for these, pay for these increases, and also make inroads into cutting the structural deficit?
Yeah, I think people can see with this budget that we were able to accomplish the goal of being able to, begin to deal with that structural deficit. I mean, this budget shrinks the structural deficit by 34%. So that goal of being able to begin to eat away at that has been accomplished with this proposed budget. We also knew that we had to do it in a not just fiscally responsible way, but a societally responsible way, because there were certain mechanisms of supporting our people, supporting Marylanders, that we had to make sure sat tight. And so when we said what adjustments we make on the budget, that included things like ways to be able to leverage a rainy day fund, where we didn't just, we hit the SAC recommended level, heading at 9.4 on the rainy day fund, but we knew that there were mechanisms of the rainy day fund that we could leverage. It meant being able to do a better job of being able to leverage state dollars, to be able to, and leverage debt, to be able to have long-term economic growth. And it meant being able to invest in the programs that we knew actually worked, and being able to use data to be able to identify what's working, and then being able to say, now it's time for us to be able to take state dollars and to be able to give a better return for our citizens. So I think we were able to show that we could still make big investments in things like childcare, still make big investments in things like housing, and also still shrink the structural deficit by 34%. You don't choose. Well, I think you'll see within the budget that we were able to take a look at the programs and some frameworks on things that, how do we think about rebasing of a budget? So for example, there's significant rebasing that we had on a lot of state programs and basically rebasing is just simply looking at the fact that during the COVID years and with federal COVID dollars, we were spending and adding that to a long-term budget and a long-term balance sheet that was not sustainable, because the capital that we were receiving during COVID times, that capital is not going to be consistent. So there is a rebasing that we had on a few different state programs that we think are still showing our measurement of being aggressive, yet at the same time dealing with current economic climates.
Structural deficits plague the state budget for years.
Yeah.
Have you all been able to identify specifically what the cause is?
Well, specifically, the cause is what creates any deficit. It's when you're increasing spending and we do not have an economy that can sustain it. Right now, if you look at the past 5 years in the state of Maryland, our economy has grown by 0.2%. Maryland's economy has essentially stayed stagnant while all of our neighbors have continued to grow. The average state in this country has grown by 7.5% over a 5-year period. Maryland has grown by 0.2%. And so we continue to have aspirations. We need to have a GDP that can actually meet the aspirations. And so I think, dealing with the deficit, it is not just about the things that will not make it inside of a budget. It's not just about cuts. We've got to get this economy going. And so that was really the balance that I think that this budget really helps to reflect. It's saying that we are going to be fiscally responsible, that we had to do some rebasing of state programs, and at the same time, it means we've got to be able to invest in things that is going to make Maryland more competitive and make our economy grow.
One of the things that always happens, you get pushback various constituencies across the state. I know that you put 150, was that $150 million back into transportation.
Rainy day, yeah.
As a call from many legislators around the state who said, look, we can't take these kinds of hits. And I know in Baltimore, that was one of them. But my question is, how do you balance that? Because I'm quite certain that every secretary that's sitting in this room right now has asked you for more money.
No.
Well, they didn't. Okay, no. But the whole idea is that what's that that you have to use in order to make sure that this budget is balanced, but not only is it balanced, does it meet your priorities?
Yeah. You know, I think the goal that we have for this administration is that this is an administration that is going to be responsive. This is an administration that's going to listen. And this is an administration that's going to work with people who are on the ground, who are most direct with the experience that people are seeing. You know, we believe that the people who are closest to the challenges are the ones who are closest to the solutions. We just need to make sure they're at the table. And that also includes during the budgetary process. So, you know, so after we release the preliminary transportation, budget, our Secretary of Transportation, our transportation team, and the remarkable team did the work. Started speaking with local elected officials, speaking with community members, hearing about what are the things that we can do, understanding the basic reality that we have got to fix how we fund transportation in this state, and that is not compromised. We still have a transportation trust fund that is pretty exclusively focused and drives its revenue from a gas tax. And we know that, if you look at over the process over the next year, we're estimating that the American people will receive an estimated $62 billion, relief in terms of gas tax. Great for the American taxpayer, really bad for states that fund their transportation trust fund on gas tax, right? We also know that we have more and more people who are driving electric vehicles, which is good, and we want to be able to encourage that. We also know, what do people who drive electric vehicles not contribute to? Gas tax. So there had to be a new way that we can rethink the way we're going to fund this in a long-term basis. But we also knew if there was an opportunity to provide a bridge for us to get to that point, that's what we were going to provide. And so we were able to tap into a rainy day fund, still keeping the rainy day fund, not just at, but above SAC recommended levels. And at the same time, provide a one-year, one-time relief to help us to do that bridge as we're continuing to get feedback from the Train Commission, and as we're continuing to get feedback about how we think about funding transportation on a long-term basis.
What do you mean by rebasing exactly? And can you name one or two programs that will be rebased?
Yeah, so rebasing is basically just saying, looking at the way we have funded certain items pre-pandemic. It's looking at it on a basis of pre-pandemic, because we understand that the pandemic numbers are a bit of an anomaly, because so much of that balance sheet inflation, it was done based on federal dollars that came on board. So for example, you can take a look at the Lottery Agents Commission as an example, where during the past few years, you've seen a significant intake and a windfall that's come from lottery agencies. The same thing about how we're looking at funding for certain private entities in higher education. And so rebasing is just simply saying that the benchmark for where we are should not be on how we're thinking about it in the past few years, because you do have outliers that plays into the past few years. We have to be able to think about pre-pandemic numbers, because that's a more accurate reflection of our current economic status.
So one or two programs that will get rebased or cut?
So mention how we think about lottery agencies, how we think about funding for higher education and private higher education, particularly for graduate students. These are things that we were very disciplined and very thoughtful about, making sure that our long-term aspirations actually matches our financial prospects going forward, and not with the anomalies that continue to be considered. Well, there's a series of programs that we looked at from a state budgetary perspective that really looked at how can we focus on rebasing.
When you make the decision to provide more funding for the private academy within DJS, did you also look at the other programs that are being offered in DJS to decide what areas could be cut when looking at this agency?
Absolutely. I think it wasn't just DJS, it was every agency that we really looked at it with a fine-tooth comb to understand which programs were working, which programs needed additional support, which programs showed more promise. You know, the secretary pointed out, and you know, before running for governor, I ran one of the largest poverty-fighting organizations in this country. One of the things that we did was we put in early funding for things, and we were then able to show government, hey, this thing works. It's now ready to go public. The Thrive Academy is actually an interesting example, as the secretary pointed out, where this is something that really came from ARPA funds. We knew that was not going to be sustainable. It was one-time funding, but what this did was it gave an opportunity to prove efficacy. And if you look at the numbers that are coming out of Thrive, we've seen some very early encouraging results about the young people that are participating in the Thrive Academy. And so now we feel like this is now a point when we can take this public, start, you know, use state dollars to be able to support the, you know, our most at risk young people, the people who have the highest probability of either being a victim or a perpetrator of violence, and saying we've got to do a better job of getting more supports for them, because as I mentioned before, if we have a system that we're putting young people in and they're coming out harder and they're coming out you know, less equipped to be able to re-enter society, then we're really doing something wrong. Yes, I think you'll see throughout the budget that we were able to take a fine-tooth comb at every single one of our agencies and understand what is the best and the most proper use of taxpayer dollars.
Thank you. Can you tell us which program that's actually? Go ahead, can you tell us which any programs that?
Yeah, I think again, as you're going through the budget, you'll be able to see the analysis that went through with every single aspect of not just DJS, but every department within the Maryland State government.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.